up, y'all? Back here. Is y'all a term that is in the Northeast, Steve? You got to be on resident expert.
You said y'all?
I said, what's up, y'all?
Nah, we just say what's up.
What's up? Just
but no,
y'all.
I spent 10 years in Texas though, so y'all's not. That's not odd for me. What up? What up, y'all? Hey, y'all.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of Anyway, what's up? My name is Dottie Lewis again, lead pastor, Blueprint Church.
Stephen Lee in the house.
Jorge Mendoza.
Here again, back at it, ready to get it into. We are in the midst of this kind of agitation versus advocate conversation that we've been hitting on for the last couple of sessions. And now we're talking about this idea of our fifth R, meaning to relate. An advocate is one who relates to all parties with concern. Yeah. I think this is a critical one because a lot of times there's a certain vantage point that you come from, especially if you're the offended, whether you're the offender or the offended. And a lot of times we even see that. It's kind of like, a lot of times majority culture may say, man, why do we always bring up the race card? But then on the other side, it's kind of like, why? Because race is an issue. Race matters. And, so you have these two tensions. But a lot of times when we go, we only want to people to understand from my vantage point. And one of the kind of the principles or rules that have kind of dominated my thought when it comes to this conversation is seek to understand before trying to be understood, right? In the passage we see, again, Paul talking in verse 12, the second half of verse 12. I'll just read it. It says this. He says, I am sending him back to you. I am sending my very own heart. Yeah. And this is Paul referring to Onesimus. Yeah. We talked about running to the tension, but running with the heart of reconciliation. And then now he says, I'm sending my very own heart. So this is someone who's near and dear to him. And on one end, he has his heart and his passion for Onesimus, but he's already established his affection for Philemon. Earlier in the passage in verse 1 and 2, it says, to Philemon, our dear friend and co-worker, to Aphia, our sister, to Archippus, our fellow soldier, and to the church that meets in his house. Yeah. A lot of times some scholars believe that he's talking actually, that's his wife, Philemon's wife and Philemon's son. Okay. That, some people believe. So there's this affection that he has for him and his household, but he also has affection for Onesimus. And so finally, here Paul has this concern, or he wants to relate to both parties with concern. Yeah. How important is that as we start dealing with kind of this divide, the Republican, the Democrat, the black and the white? How important is that we have this concern for both?
Yeah, I think it's tremendously important. I mean, I love what you brought up here. I think one of the things that I often feel as a bridge builder is, and this is just, I think, honesty, is that when you have concern for people just outside of your particular ethnic group, your political party, is that, man, it's exhausting, because it'd be very easy to always, I think, communicate in a way which is consistent with people that are like me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think what I see in this passage is you can see the vulnerability in Paul really to send a person to that he cares about to somebody else that he cares about. So you just see just the layers of relationship. Yeah. And I think often what I feel in these particular moments, I think especially for pastors that are pastoring in multi-ethnic churches, have multi-ethnic relationships, of it's, I think, just the reality that, dude, it can be spiritually and emotionally exhausting because of I think seeing yourself as a person who is a person of peace, a person who desires reconciliation. And so I think for me it's just a word of encouragement. I think in looking at Paul's example and saying that what God calls us to is worth it. I think we have Paul as an example, we have Christ as an example, but I don't think it ignores just the realities of how difficult it is to live in all of those different places.
And the question becomes is how do we balance that tension, especially in a multicultural, multi-ethnic. We had elders at our church early on. They used to ask, hey, how would they accept me because this is, I'm a Republican. It's kind of like the assumption that everybody else is going to be Democrats. It is kind of like how do you not offend the Republicans or the people who are excited about Trump becoming elected and at the same time balance the tension of the people who are literally grieving and have a concern for both and have that desire to shepherd both. And that's hard. You, Jorge, a couple of episodes ago, you mentioned that the what's the guy's name?
Lemuel Haynes.
Yeah, Lemuel Haynes. I mean, share that. I think it'd be good to share that story again of just the concern for both.
Sure. Yeah, he was Revolutionary era pastor. He fought in the Revolutionary War. He was of mixed ethnicity. His father was black, his mother was white. And he, after some time growing up and coming to the faith and getting involved in abolition, but his abolitionism, he stated, was motivated not only with concern for the enslaved African, but also for the enslavers, as he understood that slavery not only dehumanized the person who was suffering under it, but slavery also dehumanized the one that was committing that offense. So it's out of love that we should engage both groups, because the reality is we're supposed to love other human beings because they bear God's image, but what we usually do is love other human beings who bear our image, right? So you have my values, you vote like I do, you are interested in the same things I'm interested in, and when we do that, we fail to love. And then when we try to reach across to the other side, it won't be authentic because we're not really concerned about them. We're really only concerned about them agreeing with our particular agenda.
Do you feel like it's something that our generation, meaning our generation, kind of the 35 and up, or the show put the 30 and up, like, do you feel like it is harder for our generation than the previous generation? Because we grew up in the generation that like either had to like Prince or Michael, Star Wars or Star Trek. By the way, Star Wars was hopefully that was
Star Wars or Star Trek.
Yeah, Star Wars or Star Trek. Michael Jackson or Prince. Mike.
That's a tough East Coast or West Coast.
East Coast or West Coast. Lakers or Celtics.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, this generation, they like wherever LeBron is. It's kind of like, like it's just kind of like it don't really matter.
Is that a shot at me?
I mean,
I felt like that was kind of one of those subtweets that the young folks talk about.
The subtweets? No, I'm just trying to call it that as it is.
Because I'm kind of like that with LeBron.
That's why I don't get that. So that's what I'm saying. Like
the free agency.
Do you feel like it's harder to embrace both sides? Because I've been taught like you can't like Michael and Prince. It's like what Jesus says. You got to either love God or money. You can't love both.
You can't love them both.
I don't know.
I think it is easier for this generation, at least just for what is being shown and how they're acting, even in the church, that they're seeing. And we could hold on to biblical certain tenets of the faith and also be engaged in social justice kind of stuff, which was not as popular or as easily done maybe a generation or two ago.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. Because they're embracing a more holistic view of the needs of our own souls and the needs of our society.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned earlier about the idea of the vulnerability of Paul. I mean, it's kind of like if you have two people who are loved that you love fighting instead of like mom and dad fighting with one another, and you see that there's beef and there's tension. You just kind of like, man, you want them to get together and reconcile, work things out. Like, man, as a pastor, like what. How would you counsel people through that?
I think personally, I mean, I always, I always feel a little bit torn because, honestly, I think the landscape that we find ourselves in as pastors, practitioners, and there's not a lot of books, not a lot of curriculum on just kind of living where we live. I mean, obviously, I think we've got models from the civil rights movement. But those, I think, kind of our forefathers in that particular generation were fighting for just the right to be at the table. Mm-hmm. And I think when we're kind of advancing this thing forward, and we're talking about reconciliation, integration, it's just a new landscape. And so I think what I hope to do, I think in our congregation, is to provide, I think, spaces and places for people to be open and honest with what they're struggling with. I mean, so really after we had, I think one of the kind of the last shootings, I can't remember if it was Philando Castile or I honestly, I can't remember. There have been so many, but I remember after kind of the last one, I felt just kind of this impetus to do something. So I just remember, telling our associate pastor, hey, send out an email to everybody in our our MailChimp, and I just said, hey, let's just invite people over so that we can provide a place for people to talk, for ethnic minorities in our congregation to be able to share a little bit of what they were experiencing, then also for their white brothers and sisters or Asian American brothers and sisters or Hispanic brothers and sisters to be able to hear. Here's what we're dealing with. And again, here's what I said. Our hope in that particular moment was not that we would solve the world's problems, but I think what we wanted to reflect was this countercultural ethic of the Christian community. I think what we aspirationally hope to be, and what I think Christ would say that's kind of the embodiment of the one another's, that we would love each other, that we would defer to one another, that we would think the best of one another. So I think my hope, I think imperfectly, is to provide, I think, our people, our church, with an example of what that looks like.
So how did that, because a lot of times even in those type of environments, sometimes it can feel like, man, the white people come in and it's just like, oh, I'm so sorry what everyone else has done to you. Yeah. It's just kind of like the white guilt comes out. And, how do you shepherd both parties? How do you intentionally, because we talk about the advocate as one who has a concern for both. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And like Paul did, he had a concern for Onesimus, but also for Philemon and his family. And so it's just kind of like, how do you take both without feel like you're taking sides?
Yeah. That's a good question, brother. I think I hope to, in the midst of our congregation, just people that I'm in a relationship with, I think to know as much as I can about their story, their narrative. I think the challenge, often comes in culture where we kind of create these ambiguous types of people that really don't have faces, they don't have names, they don't have stories, and we try to solve the black issue, the white issue, the Hispanic issue, the gay issue, and we kind of, or the gay, homosexual, transgender. And we're not kind of taking those people and really saying like, okay, is there a person that I'm in relationship with that has a particular story that I can identify with, that I can talk to? And so I think what we hope to do, I think in our culture, in our congregation, is that the pain that people are experiencing, that it has a name. It's a face associated. It's not just a black issue. It's Tim, who's a part of this congregation. It's Sally. It's Sue. It's Anibe. I mean, like, and so I think that
is Anibe. What nationality is Anibe?
He is Nigerian. Okay, literally, I made up the first two names. I was like, and the third name was a dude that I knew.
Okay, good.
So Anibe, if you're listening, what's up, man? It was just random. Yeah. Okay. So I was trying to be, but I think to remove, even the brother who's standing on the block from just a person that people should be afraid of, to say like, no, like, dude, that's Mo, and Mo has dreams, hopes, aspirations, and Mo isn't completely satisfied the way that his community is. So like, so I think it's to bring it from a level of ambiguity down to, these are real people with real hurts, real problems, real ambitions, real goals, and real desires to see their communities thrive as well as people in their family.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Steve. I mean, one of the things that I talk about, at our church, is that if we really want to cultivate the heart for when these times happen, you got to cultivate that year round.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier is that you have genuine burden for someone, either through relationship or proximity. Yeah. And I think a lot of times is that we're not able to deal with these things, but it really shows the fragileness of our relationships, that we don't have real and genuine relationships. And but if you're cultivating those things, if you're always aiming for genuine relationships, then you're able to have genuine relationships in the hard times and the happy times. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But if you're not, if you have a superficial relationship, then when the hard times come, all it's going to do is expose the superficiality of the relationship. And so we always got to aim for genuine reconciliation in everything that we're doing, not just in moments of crisis. So I think that's critical. So Jorge, I mean, bring us home. Any concluding thoughts? What would you give to a leader? Specifically, let's talk to a white leader, right now that is desiring to be in the hood, or desiring to be, or pastoring a multi-ethnic church, especially in this time where, a lot of times the minorities are looking for justice. How would you recommend someone doing that?
I think one, just kind of backtracking to the issue of, the guilt. There is a sense in the Bible where there is a sense of responsibility for the sins that our people have committed in the past. Like you find groups of people repenting for things that have happened in the past. So one is being honest and acknowledging and kind of seeing that we're living in the effects of things that happened in the past. That our situation didn't come from a vacuum, and I think that's just good to do, because if that isn't somewhere acknowledged, then as a minority, I don't feel safe. You don't understand the gravity of the situation. I don't know if we can move forward because there's not a common ground to move forward on. Secondly, I just would encourage any kind of cross-cultural, any kind of moving over towards maybe the marginalized or the outcast or whatever. I just think that's a very gospel thing to do. So I would just encourage that pastor to continue on that path if you feel so led. I don't think everybody needs to be on that path, but if you do feel so led, just carry the flavor of the gospel and humility and doing what you laying down your life for the sake of other people and helping them in whatever way that you can.
Yeah, that's good. I thought you was getting pastoral and you was gonna give us a third point. All sermons have to have three.
It has to be 1, 3, 1, 3, or 6.
Yeah, he's
or 6.
That brother just stopped at 2.
That burrito, that just kind of made me happy. I'm a little bit slower than I need to be.
His blood sugar is lower. Bro, I think one of the things that you said, I know we're almost done, but man, I would encourage it, even as the Hadi said, is I think for pastors, Anglo pastors, majority culture pastors, to have pastors in their lives that are equals. I think one of the things that we often see, I think, as ethnic minorities is congregations wanting to serve the less fortunate. But a lot of times those pastors don't have African American pastors that are their equals. I mean, it's I'm mentoring the inner city pastor.
Right.
What can you learn from the pastor that's been serving in that community for 30 or 40 years? How can you learn from their experience? So I think those are the types of things that are important because I think that helps you to develop the concern for and it's not the it's not the savior complex.
Right.
It's I think that you just. I was reminded of that as you shared that.
Yeah, that sense of humility that Jesus told the disciples. He says, you are entering into other men's labors. Yeah. So just not have the mentality like God's not doing anything until I show up. But but God has been at work here, and there's things that have been going on here. I'm bringing a different element perhaps, but that doesn't mean that nothing else has been going on here. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, appreciate it, brother.
That's good. All right, we appreciate you fellas.
We'll see y'all soon.